In some workplaces, some employees who experience mental health issues may avoid or delay getting help due to the stigma associated with the issue and concerns they have with the disclosure of the issues they are experiencing. Avoiding or delaying getting help for mental health issues can have consequences for both the individuals and the people they work with. In this video, we are going to discuss stigma, disclosure, and help seeking for mental health in the workplace informed by a sex and gender-based analysis. This video is part of a series about the importance of a sex and gender-based analysis approach to mental health in the workplace. The series contains episodes on specific topics with explicit considerations for men, women, and people with diverse gender identities. You might have heard of sex and gender-based analysis, or SGBA, before, but you may want to understand more about what it means in connection with stigma, disclosure, and help seeking more specifically. We'll first briefly describe what is stigma, disclosure, and help seeking, and its relationship to workplace mental health. Then we'll describe why it's important to take an intersectional sex and gender approach to it. We'll look at some examples of people's experiences of stigma, disclosure, and help seeking. Next, we'll identify some promising practices that can be used to address stigma, disclosure, and help seeking in support of workers' mental health. We'll also briefly touch upon what we know of how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted workers' experiences of stigma, disclosure, and help seeking, and then we'll get into a specific example. First, a bit of background.
First, stigma can be described as a process that involves awareness and/or endorsement of stereotypes, labeling, separation, prejudice, and discrimination in a context in which social, economic, or political power is exercised to the detriment of members of a social group. Link and Felon, 2001. Stigma comes in different forms, such as anticipated stigma, which is the anticipation of personally being perceived or treated unfairly, and treatment stigma, where stigma is associated with seeking or receiving treatment for mental ill health. Regardless of which form, stigma is one of the leading barriers to disclosing a diagnosis of any health problem to a supervisor and help seeking for mental health at work. Next, disclosure in the context of work can be defined as telling a supervisor or member of your workplace's human resources team about a diagnosis of any health problem. Some individuals believe that mental illness is a private matter and not to be shared with others in a work setting. However, there can be both benefits and disadvantages of deciding to disclose mental health issues in a work context. To disclose or not to disclose. On the one hand, disclosing to coworkers may be helpful because they can more readily understand changes in the behavior of the person experiencing mental health issues. Employees who disclose may be able to work with a supervisor to find accommodations and strategies to help them do their work. In many jurisdictions, workplaces are required to find accommodations for people experiencing disability, including mental illness. On the other hand, disadvantages to disclosure may include receiving limited managerial support and/or accommodations, and individuals fearing the loss of promotion opportunities and employment and financial loss. Finally, help seeking refers to an adaptive coping process that is the attempt to obtain external assistance to deal with a mental health concern. Help seeking can be informal, for example by seeking help from family and friends. Help seeking can also be formal, for example by reaching out to mental health professionals, a family doctor, or workplace supports including employee assistance programs, which typically offer fast access to crisis and short-term counseling, and referrals. Now that we've established the basics of stigma, disclosure, and help seeking, we now make a case for why an SGBA lens is essential to this discussion.
What is an SGBA lens, and why is it essential to a discussion of stigma, disclosure, and help seeking? In brief, sex and gender-based analysis, or SGBA for short, is a tool or a way of thinking about things that helps us to examine sex-based and gender-based differences and similarities, and the consequences for the people involved, some of which are harmful or unjust. It's kind of like a pair of glasses that lets us see things which often go unseen. SGBA allows us to understand that neither sex, which focuses on biology, nor gender, which focuses on the social and cultural, are independent of each other. They are closely intertwined. Sex and gender and other aspects of identity, such as race, ability, cultural identity, and age, also intersect with each other. As Kimberly Crenshaw describes, intersectionality is a prism for seeing the way in which various forms of inequality often operate together and exacerbate each other. Systems of privilege and oppression act on individuals represented by their identities to produce advantage or privilege or disadvantage, such as racism and sexism. For more details, we encourage you to view the standalone episode on sex and gender-based analysis. Mental health and the workplace are both heavily shaped and influenced by sex and gender, as well as by other aspects of identity and intersectionality. Applying SGBA to examine mental health in the workplace is essential for both employees and organizations to support employees' mental health.
Now, we will look at different experiences of stigma, disclosure, and help seeking. Some people experience stigma differently than others, experience different consequences from their disclosure of mental health concerns, and have different approaches to seeking help. Specifically with respect to gender, research consistently finds lower rates of help seeking among men. This has been linked to traditional gender roles and norms of masculinity in many cultures that discourage the expression of emotion and vulnerability, and an associated fear of stigma. Canadian women are almost twice more likely than men to seek professional help for mental and emotional problems. Gender disparities in help seeking have also been found in the utilization of employer-sponsored workplace programs, such as Employee Assistance Programs, EAPs. For LGBTQ+ individuals, they can face significant challenges when it comes to help seeking, including stigma, discrimination, confidentiality concerns, and cultural insensitivity. Disclosure can be an effective strategy for dealing with discrimination and stigma. Likelihood for seeking help varies between different LGBTQ+ groups and work contexts, depending on managers' and employees' cultural knowledge. Indigenous people also face significant barriers to disclosure and help seeking because of a lack of culturally safe services from First Nations, Inuit, or Métis perspective. Many racial minorities have much lower rates of help seeking and treatment for mental health problems for similar reasons. There are a number of promising practices managers and employees can adopt to help employees with stigma, disclosure, and help seeking. They can 1. Understand and act in accordance with existing legislation. Employers have a legal duty to accommodate employees with illnesses or disabilities according to labor standards in Canada. Legislation that supports workers to maintain their work can help address discrimination associated with mental illness and assists in addressing stigma. They can also 2. Implement policies, programs, and tools. Anti-stigma interventions and mental health education and literacy programs in the workplace can improve coworkers' knowledge and supportive behavior towards employees with mental health issues. Taking a gender-based approach to workplace campaigns is necessary. Gender, for example, influences employees' engagement in anti-stigma, contact-based campaigns. Men report less contact with people with a mental illness than women, with consequences for campaign messaging effectiveness. Decision aid tools have been designed to help employees make informed decisions about disclosure of mental health problems to their employers. One study evaluating an online disclosure decision aid tool showed that close to 30% of users disclosed and did better in terms of mental health improvement than those who did not disclose. When used in male-dominated industries, such tools need to incorporate positive aspects of disclosing. In Canada, some SGBA-related research with respect to COVID-19 is underway, but more research is needed. Employees may face stigma and shame because of mental health issues that may be associated directly with the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 related stigma has risen for particular groups, including those from Chinese ethnic backgrounds and healthcare and other frontline workers more likely exposed to the virus. The circumstances surrounding the pandemic may limit employees' ability or willingness to disclose their mental illness. In one survey, more than 1 in 10 employees were concerned about losing their jobs at this time if they disclosed serious health concerns, including mental health. The increasingly remote nature of work during the pandemic surely complicates the disclosure process. With respect to help seeking, there is evidence of increased use of helplines and other mental health support services during the pandemic. The mental health effects of the pandemic will have unique impacts on stigma, disclosure, and help seeking of different groups related to mental health, many of which remain to be better understood. Next, let's take a look at one person's experience with stigma, disclosure, and help seeking, which emphasize an SGBA lens.
Hi, my name is Valerie. I've been employed by the government for a number of years. The work we do can be quite stressful at times, especially when there are tight deadlines to meet. The team I'm in has worked well together. A while ago, I decided to affirm my gender identity by transitioning. This is a step that I've thought carefully about, and that I've taken to help myself. I feel really good about it. It is important to know that transitioning is not the problem. It is the reaction of others that poses the significant hurdles for trans folks. It used to be treated like a mental illness, but it is not, just like when folks were gay. Thankfully, the mental illness diagnosis has changed in the medical profession, but not everyone sees it this way. My colleagues at work, who I got on well with before, seemed confused as to how to refer to me. In a couple of instances, they even used he, she in training to describe me. These terms really bother me. Some of my colleagues shortened my name to Val, which made me wonder whether they are doing this because that's a more gender-neutral name. Maybe they don't realize this is a microaggression. Others refuse to use my name, which is obvious when they are using everyone else's name in the context of a meeting. Then, there are the totally inappropriate questions. Early in my transition, I remember people saying things like, "Do you still have it? Seriously?" I don't understand why they would ask such personal questions. Another problem is unsolicited advice. I don't owe anyone an explanation, especially when I hardly know them. More importantly, how is my anatomy relevant to the work we are collaborating on? It takes a lot of extra work to put these colleagues at ease. My manager took some time to inform herself of what is involved in supporting an employee who is transitioning. There's a trans resources guide she found that managers and employees can consult. She has begun to realize how it is the unspoken and intangible forms of discrimination that are the hardest to overcome. For example, someone always wants to avoid working with me on the team, and she has to navigate that. My best advice is to become childlike, that is, strip away what you are taught to be afraid of. What we identify as a stigmatizing identity is learned. Stay flexible, make no presumptions, and just be normal about it. Transition isn't a race to see who can finish first. It is about being myself and making changes at my own pace.
As a manager, applying an SGBA lens to the issues of stigma, disclosure, and help seeking at work is one step towards understanding the situation described in the vignette. It will help you to better understand the issues, address them appropriately with the employee, and ensure a solution that is acceptable and fair. Based on what you know about Valerie's story and the evidence that has been presented on the basis of sex and gender and other categorizations, think about how Valerie's identities, being Black, transgender, and transitioning, impact her experiences of transitioning and depression, and her decision to not disclose this in the workplace. How might her managers' and coworkers' awareness and lack of awareness of her different identities shape the way they treat her? How might workplace culture impact more broadly on diverse identities and lead or contribute to mental health issues? How might workplace culture, stigma, and discrimination affect individuals' decisions to disclose or not, or seek help or not? For example, a Black transgender woman in the process of transitioning may feel unsupported and stressed, leading to mental health issues. Disclosure might result in stigmatization. A final thought. As a manager, think about your employee's life as part of a larger context before coming to any conclusions or developing plans. Think about what the evidence shows in general in terms of the impact of sex and gender and other identity factors on stigma, disclosure, and help seeking, and in turn on stress and the mental health of an employee.
We hope that this episode makes it clear that applying an SGBA lens is essential for both employees and organizations to support employees' mental health. Other episodes in this series address other mental health in the workplace concerns from an explicit sex and gender lens. The full series can be found on this YouTube channel and links to the text-based toolkit at the Healthy Professional Worker website. This video and the series is derived from an SGBA policy partnership between the CIHR Institute of Gender and Health and Health Canada and the Public Health Agency of Canada.